he had a bigger cudgel. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I hear lots of energy in the room, not so much up here with the moderator. I'm coming off of a really bad stomach flu experience, so my voice may be wandering in and out. So for those of you who have hearing difficulties, it's not you, it's me. Okay, so with that said, moving right along. Okay, if you want to log into the Wi-Fi here, that's the login access. But what I'm going to request is that when we go to the presentation, that people log out of the Wi-Fi access here, because we're going to have our presenter coming in via Skype. So we're going to have a remote presenter. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to do is make sure that yes, go ahead.
It says GLSC instead of GSLC.
Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, Mac Club, Apple Access.
Your finding is correct.
Did they change it?
It's always been GLSC.
Yeah, it's a typo.
It's a typo that they've always had.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'll make that correction later on.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I was wrong, but I was right.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Maybe.
If you and I are talking, you were right. If our wives are in the room,
Then
we're wrong. Okay. Okay. So anyway, welcome that you came out today. Apologies for canceling the meeting last month, but I think we made a good call. Okay. So, as I was saying, our presentation is going to be via Skype. We have okay, Adam wouldn't like me saying this, but I'll just say he's well known in the Apple community. He's a fount of knowledge. Okay. So anyway, with that said, so when we go to the presentation, I'm going to ask that you not be connected to the Wi-Fi, just in case. And I'm going to keep things real short here, so we've got a little bit of extra play time if we need to. News items. Does anybody have any news they want to share with the group? Going once, going twice. Yes, Rick.
Couple quick security items, just so people are aware. There was a big LibreOffice update because of a major security flaw.
Mm-hmm.
It's also related back to its parent OpenOffice. So the updated LibreOffice is already available if you use LibreOffice. OpenOffice hasn't been updated yet, so it's still there. It is going to be updated sometime soon, they say. And then Apple just released a new update to iOS, which also closed 2 major security flaws plus their own bug.
Yeah.
So you need to do that update as well.
Yeah. A younger individual, I want to say maybe he's 14.
He's very young.
Yeah. Discovered there was a bug in FaceTime that you could listen to people at the other end before they had said yes, except call if you did certain things. And he told the folks at Apple about that. And there was a lot of consternation on their end. And so they released a bunch of updates for the tablets, the phones, the notebooks, the iMacs, the Mac Minis, the Mac Pros, all of that stuff to correct that. So it's what you call a low-level vulnerability.
did they hire the kid?
They paid him.
Not that I know of. However, there are 4 individuals I know who work for Apple who were doing stuff when they were 13, 14, 15 years old that got the attention of Apple. One fellow, Mike Bombich, who works for Apple now, got Steve Jobs reached out to him to talk to him, and Steve Jobs, so he's in his big office at Cupertino, and this lady answered, and no, let's see, wait a minute. Some young lady answered it, and it's Mike's sister. She said, well, let me ask my mom if it's okay for him to talk to you. And at that point, Steve sort of got the idea that maybe this was not somebody that was, you know, over 21. And so what they did instead was that led to what they call the summer intern program that they did in conjunction with the National Science Foundation, where they started getting some really, really smart young people in there just to see what Apple was about. And Mike has been working for them, I want to say, for about 4 or 5 years. This is the fellow that wrote a program called Carbon Copy Cloner. Okay. And his first rev of Copy Cloner was when he was 12.
Wow.
Okay. So anyway, so once again, you're being snarky, but you're not. Yes.
So this latest one, I read in the media that the boy's mother, it took 10 days for her to get Apple to respond back or to recognize basically their
Yes, that's because she was calling the regular helpline. The kid apparently has a developer account, so when nobody responded back, he just posted it on the developer forum, and then they got back to him.
Well, I heard subsequently, though, that Apple is revising its bug reporting process so that if any users uncover things, it'll be easier in the future to report them.
That is correct.
Somehow.
That is correct. And they're double thinking whether they want to have a bonus plan where they, you know, pay you for, because they have some Nimrod out there who has supposedly discovered a flaw in Keychain that's part of the Apple operating system. But he won't tell them what the flaw is unless they pay him money.
That's the kid in Germany.
Because he doesn't like the standard bounty that they have. I think they call it bounty. Okay, so with that said, Kathy Wassenich.
Yes, sir.
I brought the empty tin back. So before you leave, you take the, I've been known to, people can bribe me with cookies. It's basically the way it goes. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any news items? Otherwise, I'll just repeat what Rick said, and that is NeoOffice, Apache OpenOffice, LibreOffice, all have released security updates. Well, NeoOffice hasn't yet. They're still dithering. And my understanding, it was actually a Java.
Yeah, big security flaw.
Okay, so there were security patches that you should be putting on those if you're using those programs. And then the other one is, of course, as always, when you have a security patch for your phone from Apple, or your tablet from Apple, or your computer from Apple, you should apply those. So they're doing some stuff with that. I'm trying to think of anything else that's new and wonderful. I'm going to just say no. Okay, so let's go to freebies wanted and for sale. Okay.
The obligatory hand up here. I did bring in a freebie.
Okay.
If anybody still runs older software and needs a copy of Dan's backup, it's just accumulating.
Yeah, that's
on my
retrospect backup. And if
Yeah.
you need a tape drive to go with it, I have about 15 or 20 DAT tape drives, and I've got some DLT drives. And, you know, if you're interested in that, you're still doing tape backup, let me know.
Do they have SCSI interfaces?
I have interface cards go with them, yes, and cables. Otherwise, they're going to go out of here in the spring.
But also,
Yes, I'm sorry.
I am selling my first gen MacBook Pro, or iPad Pro, sorry,
Okay.
with pencil and case. I mean, pencil and case are probably $200 values, and probably looking at somewhere around $600-700.
Okay. Okay. And then the other one we had was Ms. Barker brought in an HP inkjet printer 2012 PhotoSmart D110A series, all in one printer. It's the black box sitting on the table next to the donuts. And what she says it works fine, and there's some cartridges with it. All she's asking is a donation to the Humane Society of Greater Dayton. So if anybody's looking for an inkjet printer,
And you love dogs.
Where's Phyllis?
Here we go.
Okay, Phyllis is sitting right next to our esteemed treasurer, Kathy Kohler. Okay, so raise your hand one more time, Phyllis. She's wearing the crazy cat lady shirt.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anybody else bring anything in? Going once,
There's
going
freebies
twice?
on that table from O'Reilly,
Okay.
T-shirts, and I don't know what's left over there.
Yeah,
That was-
so there's also some freebies behind the donuts from the O'Reilly Book Publishing Company. There's some T-shirts over there. There's some little notebooks. There's some pens. And they're the pens where you got the squishy tip so you can use it on a tablet. Or if you click it, you can write with it. Okay, so those are nice pens to have. And I'm trying to think, there's something else over there.
A little writing thing.
Okay, I'm not sure who brought this in, but it's a, okay. Who was that from? Who brought, okay. Cap Kaywood brought that in. It's a freebie?
Yeah, what is it?
Okay. It's a, like a Wacom tablet where you can draw on it.
Oh.
Okay, but it looks like it's just the tablet itself, not a stylus with it. Okay, anybody else going once, going twice? Okay, moving right along. Help desk. Help.
Quick question. I have a High Sierra. Wait, it's not Mojave. High Sierra. And when the stuff comes up about updates, I don't want Mojave. All right, but the others, if I click on that, does it automatically install it, or do I have a choice?
Okay. So you're talking about notifications. So you get this thing that comes up in the
right
corner.
side,
Yeah. What I do is, rather than just say no or install later, I tell it no, and then I launch the App Store program on my computer. So I can see exactly what is it that it wants to install. Okay. And then on the basis of that, then I look to see, okay, is this going to screw up something that I already have running on the computer? Okay. And then I would caution everyone, if you're running older versions of Microsoft Office, so that would be Office 2011 or older, you want to be really careful before going up to Mojave, because Mojave 64-bit only applications. So that means your Office 2011 isn't going to work, and your Office 2008 isn't going to work, and your Office 2004 isn't going to work. And then that also goes for other things, like there's an application that I installed for my wife. It's called Sheep Shaver. And it allows you to run Mac OS 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 software on Intel Macintosh. Okay. So, you know, she's got a bridge game that's from like way back, but it's really good. It's a really good bridge program, but it won't run on any modern machine unless she's running Sheep Shaver.
I don't, on the update, I don't remember a no. All I remember was either install or if you click, there's a no that you can click on.
Later.
Later.
Later shows up.
Later, okay. Click on that.
So
Now
I'm
look
doing
on the outside.
no in quotes.
But it shows you what's there.
Yes.
Click later.
No, if you click later, then what you want to do is when that goes away, is then launch that blue App Store program.
Okay.
And then click on it.
Yeah, it'll show you.
Yeah, click on, let's see, let's just do it here. The App Store. Hello. Don't do that. Thank you.
I just got an update. As long as it's a Mojave update, you're fine.
App Store. So this is the App Store app. All right, when it first comes up, what you're getting is, it's like you've got the weekly circular from Kroger. Okay, these are the featured items. Okay. So what you want to do is, up there, not all, just under the menu bar, it says updates. So you want to click on that. And then it will go and look and see what updates it has. Now, the reason why I always do it this way is because my wife has an Apple ID, and some programs were purchased under her Apple ID. And I have an Apple ID, and some apps were purchased under my Apple ID. And even though we have them linked under a family plan, you still gotta, yeah, okay. And this way, when I click update, it'll prompt me for which Apple ID account I'm supposed to be logged in as. Okay. Yes, Kathy told it.
When I, in of that, of the little sign up in the corner, mine says install for details, but there's nothing that says no or later or anything like that.
Click
I
on
just click the
details.
details and then click Apple.
It depends on what version of the operating system you're running, what you get up there. Yeah. And you know me, I'm back
No, I have no idea.
retrograde. I tend to run older versions of the operating system. So the messages are the older, more comprehensible ones.
It's
Bill,
offshoot.
Bill, there are some updates that are done through system preferences now. So how do you know whether to go to the App Store or whether to go to the system preferences?
Okay, Mr. Howe raised his hand, so I'm assuming he has a better answer than mine.
This isn't the latest operating system only, but the system preferences is strictly or Mac OS updates. You go to the App Store for any updates for any applications. Now, if you have the latest operating system. Previous one is not like that.
The other thing to keep in mind is that if it's programs that are outside of the Apple ecosphere, so that means it's not from Apple, and it's not a third-party developer that sells it through Apple. So that would be like Microsoft, a LibreOffice, something like that, Java. They have their own updaters, and this is where most of us run into trouble, because those third-party updaters very often will have other stuff they want to put on your computer that you may or may not want. Yes, David Jones.
What's that app, the fourth from the end with the two
The
dots on
fourth
it?
from the end, that is a program called Skype.
No, fourth from the end.
Fourth
That's
from
the
the
first.
end. Okay, 1, 2, 3, that one?
Yeah.
The one that's got like birds? That's OpenOffice.
That's what I was trying to think.
OpenOffice.
And that works pretty good, right?
I've been very happy with it. I use it, okay. The parameter, the sort of the environment I work within, I'm on Microsoft operating system, so I'm doing Windows. I do Linux operating systems, so I'm on like Linux Mint, and I'm on Manjaro and Fedora, CentOS, all these different things. And then I'm also running Unix on occasion on some systems that I work on. And then I have Mac OS. And then I have the old Mac stuff and the old Apple II stuff that I still do. Okay. So what I look for is, rather than me have to learn a mail program for Windows and a different mail program for Apple and another mail program for Linux, I look for programs that are common to all those different operating systems. So the first one that comes to mind would be Acrobat Reader. There's an Acrobat Reader for Linux systems, for Windows systems, for Mac OS, etc. Another one would be Firefox from the Mozilla organization. It's a web browser, There's a Firefox for Linux, there's a Firefox for Windows, there's a Firefox for Mac, and the interface, the buttons and controls are pretty much the same. Those are the programs I tend to use because I don't have to learn as much and I don't have to retrain myself as much. Okay, so with that said, one of the reasons why I like Apache OpenOffice and Libre OpenOffice is because they've got a Mac version, there's a Windows version, there's a Linux version, and there's even a Unix version. Okay? Okay? Pound that one into the ground. Okay. Yes?
How do you block a text message that's spam? He's been getting quite a few. Oh, okay.
My flip phone.
I like my flip phone.
So are we talking about coming into smartphones?
Through an iPhone.
Through an iPhone?
Mark showed me how to go.
He was getting notifications.
You got Free and Walmart and DirecTV, Rent to Own. He's been getting quite a few recently.
Okay. Usually it means that you've got some sort of an account with them. No. Okay. Go ahead.
Some of the things aren't really from.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like 3 numbers, a dash, and then 2 more numbers.
Yeah, that's, you don't know who the hell it is.
Yeah, that's right. And so you're sort of in the position of, I'm really tired of strangers walking up to my front door ringing the doorbell. Well, you really don't have any way to stop someone from doing that.
You can't block them.
There
When
really
they're
isn't
coming
any
in
way that you
repeatedly.
can block them, no.
Except the emergency ones.
There are, if you're on a landline, there's hardware you can buy. You can buy a mobile cordless phone system from Panasonic where once they come in, you can hit a button and block and it then remembers them and doesn't ring it anymore when they come in. But again, there's an almost infinite number of phone numbers they can use.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, I know. We've been getting.
the one thing that you can do is you can turn off notifications on your phone so that it doesn't tell you every time there's an email coming in or a text message coming in. Okay, I know that's.
But it would still show up.
It's still coming in, but you just basically ignore it.
Delete it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I wouldn't even bother to delete it. I just let them accumulate, and then once a month I go in and I just don't erase
But they're right on the front of your phone.
Okay. So this is again one of the reasons why I'm still doing the old flip phone. Okay, because you can. Yeah. All right, let me see. Let me go to the back, Rod Byler, and then we'll go to the front.
Perhaps a question that doesn't fit, but on my iMac, I got a notice that Google Plus was going.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? And
Okay.
my wife and I don't ever use it, so I don't think it's applicable.
Are you familiar with a social media sharing place called Facebook?
Don't use it.
I understand that, but are you aware of them? Okay.
I am.
Well, now, you got to remember, if Facebook is something that's really, really popular, the folks over at Google are going to say, oh, we want to get in on this too. Maybe we can get some revenue from it. So they started this thing, I'm going to say it was 8 years ago, called Google Plus, where friends gather. Okay? If you have a Google Gmail account, in other words, you have a Google account, you automatically got a Google Plus account, whether you used it or not. And now what they're doing is they're telling you that that's going away.
Google's backing out of the Facebook business.
Yeah, because there's no money to be made. Okay. Or let's say, to be more precise, they've determined that with the current political climate in Washington and the Eurozone, it's not a good place to be. Okay. Now with that said, I'm going to add one other thing, and that is Yahoo and AOL are now owned by Verizon. Now, part of Yahoo was a service called Flickr for photographs. Okay. Well, Flickr got bought by a company called SmugMug. I think that's how it's pronounced, SmugMug. Okay. And basically, it's if you want to print photo books, or you want to have photos developed, you know, that kind of stuff. They do that. Well, they have bought Flickr. Well, Flickr was an all-you-could-eat type service with Yahoo. But these are back in the days where the people who were doing this at Yahoo didn't understand just how voracious of an appetite people have for photographs, and just how many photographs they'd put up there. Okay. So that whole service, Flickr, is now belongs to SmugMug. So you're going to get, if you have a Yahoo account, you're going to get a similar message from SmugMug indicating that you're not going to be able to store an infinite number of photographs anymore, and you need to pull down the photographs that you've got that are in excess of the small amount of free storage that they have. Okay, so I just thought I'd throw that out there. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're using a Yahoo or an AOL email address, okay, there's a concerted effort. They're being run by a holding company called Oath, and I don't really know too much about this stuff, but basically they're trying to generate revenue from those free email accounts. Okay. So what I've noticed with some of my customers is all of a sudden an Yahoo email account that they've had no problems with for years, all of a sudden now they have to put in their email address again and a whole bunch of their password and a whole bunch of background information that they didn't before. And it's marketing information that Oath is trying to grab. So what they'll do is they'll temporarily disable your email to get your attention, and then you have to log in to get the account cleared. And then they have the 24/7 service that costs so much a month where they'll take care of this stuff for you automatically or increase. Yeah, okay. So, you know, just be aware that the glory days of free email are leaving us. Okay. Okay, yes, Bill.
Back to the text thing.
Yes, Bill.
You can block a text number, okay? So you go to the text, you open up the text that you want to block, and in the top right corner is just a blank area, but just tap that, and a little screen will drop down, and there's an info button. Tap the info button, then you go up to the very top row where the number is, and there's a little blue telephone, and then there's an arrow to the right. Tap that arrow, and then you can block that call, that particular number.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, the thing to consider though is how do you want to spare your disposable time?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather be sitting there having a nice glass of wine and maybe some cheese, or would you rather be spending hours blocking these things? Basically, that particular block service is meant for when you've got somebody like you drop your phone,
Okay.
you know, and he's just not accepting it, and you want to just, that's it. The people that you read about on the crazy news, where the person has sent text to the other person 140,000 times in 2 days, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. We've been just deleting pretty much, so.
Yeah. And again, just a reminder, the way I do those deletions, I don't do it on a daily basis. I basically, you know, every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, go and clear those out.
Well, he's been getting 4 a day sometimes, so. Thank you.
Well, just connecting to that, in mail, if you're using mail for your client for emails, there's in preferences, there's a rules button you can push on. You can establish rules so that if you get an email from a site that looks like it's bogus or something, you can put rules in there so if it ever sees it again in the future or variants of it, it will automatically filter it out to trash and you never see it.
Yeah. The other thing that
I'm
I
up
do,
over 600 rules in mine.
if I'm using the Apple Mail program, what I will generally do is I'll turn off the smart addresses. In other words, instead of it showing me Phyllis Barker, it'll instead show the actual email address it was sent from. Now, I have absolutely nothing against receiving emails from Phyllis. However, sometimes stuff will come through. It'll say it's Phyllis Barker, but it's actually not from Phyllis. It's some other outfit. I've gotten to the point on some of my email accounts where I've said I only want to see it if they are in my contact list. Okay. And so that helps to filter stuff out. Okay, with that said, now I'm going to finally come back to Ray up in the front.
Just two quickies. Yahoo, and what else does Verizon own?
AOL.
AOL. And the other question, my daughter's using LibreOffice. Is that one of them that's
Yeah.
this problem? Okay.
Well, it's not really a problem because they have the patches available. You basically update to the latest version.
Well, that's what I'm going to advise her.
Right.
Okay.
Was there a third part to the question?
That's it.
Great. So simple this week. This is
It's too cold to go.
Okay. All right. So anyway, going once, going twice. Anybody else? Yes.
On the, you noted, you said AOL now, because it's being bought, is now gathering more information, and I did fill out one of these little things.
It's not that they're gathering more information. It's that they want to monetize the information that they have.
Yeah.
So what they're doing, it'd be like, okay.
So they're going to harass me unless I pay them not to.
No.
They haven't quite gotten to that stage yet. But what they're doing is, as they consolidate email servers, okay, they're going through all of these lists of free email accounts, and they're looking to see what metadata there is associated with that account. So if you had an account xyz@aol.com, and there's a first name and a last name, but they don't have a street address, or they don't have a cell phone number.
Right.
Oh, that's the real gold now, cell phone numbers.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. So, you know, they'll prompt you to put in that other information. So the thing you want to think about is, all right, so do I want to continue to use an AOL or a Yahoo if this becomes problematic? Or do I want to use something like an Apple email account? Because if you have an Apple ID, you have an Apple Mail account. Or my Google Gmail account. Or some other free email provider. Now, I myself have gone with an outfit, I did this a couple of years ago, it's called Proton Mail. They're based in Switzerland because of some of the stuff I was doing with customers in the Eurozone. They would not, if I wanted to continue to do business with them, I could not use an free email account from any of the standard ones in North America, especially Google. Okay, because they're paranoid about the federal government and its special arrangement with Google. Okay, so instead I set up a free email account at Proton Mail. They use a higher level of security with it, so that I can actually send encrypted emails without any special software. So I'm now using that for whenever I've got something like a customer will. This is going to sound not bright, but it's the real world. A customer calls me up. They say, I can't get into my AOL mail. Yeah. What's my password?
What's my password?
So I go, all right, yeah, I know. I helped you document that. Can you find the printed sheet?
Yeah.
They can't find the printed sheet. I go, okay, fine. If I'm going to send them something about that, I will send it from Proton Mail. I won't send it using an AOL or a Yahoo or a Juno or
Which other one
Gmail.
do you use usually? I mean, do you use AOL?
Yes. In fact, I used AOL before it was AOL. Originally, AOL was Apple Online. It was the...
America Online.
No. Apple. This is before, I'm trying to remember the guy's name that bought it. He was an Apple employee. That was the email that was for vendors and developers at Apple. And Steve,
Sky Dayton? Sky Dayton?
Yeah, anyway, I want to say Coates, but it's not Coates. Anyway, but when they said they were going to take it down, they weren't going to use it anymore, he bought that from Apple. He was an Apple employee running all this stuff. And then he started out with in every Sunday magazine you had the AOL disc in there. And then there was later the CDs, etc. Okay. So my Herrick at AOL account actually was Herrick at Apple Online. So yeah, so yes, I use AOL, I use Yahoo, I use Google, I use Juno, I use Apple, I use a couple others, and it's because my customers have those, and if I use that account, then I know where the switches are to flip to do this and to do that, the interface. Okay. So I do it because my customers use them. And every so often, one of my customers will say that they have an account with blah, 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 and I'll go, okay, I'll set one up for myself.
So the reason they're asking you to say for the cell phones, they want to send you stuff on your cell phone?
They can sell the information to marketers.
Including my cell phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there.
Or even better, they can say, we'll direct the ads to the people that they're most relevant to.
Oh.
Okay. So anyway, console. There's ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Okay. Yes, Mr. Reinhardt.
I admit to being somewhat confused. By background, I've got a landline, and if I go to a different provider, I can keep my number. Now with email accounts, if I go to somebody else, I'll have an entirely new email address.
Correct.
Okay. So I can't. I guess that answers.
Okay.
You got to change a
Typically,
million
what
emails.
you normally would do.
A million businesses.
Okay. What you normally do, if you're changing your email address, you have the old email address forward everything to the new email address. And you only answer things from the new one.
How do you get that to forward from the old to the new?
Okay. Remember how email works. The email is not on your computer, it's on their server. So you would log into that particular email service using a web browser, and you would go into those settings where you can say forward all mail to, and you give them the address you want it forwarded to.
I see. Okay.
So it's in the same section where you would do your, I'm on vacation.
I was looking at that because I wanted to change out of EarthLink.net because I get a million emails a day that I don't want.
Yeah.
And I'm sick and tired of it, and my son says, change it. I says, but I've got about 5 pages of names, passwords, and usernames for all these different organizations. I got to contact every one of them and tell them I got a new email address. That would be a lot of work.
Yeah.
So the other way to do it's the way you said. Huh?
You have filtering available on EarthLink too.
If you're getting an email that you don't want,
you don't respond to it. You don't respond to it. And then eventually, once you've gotten the people you actually want to communicate with, they're used to receiving a response from the new address, okay, then you shut down the old one.
but wouldn't they be forwarding the ones you don't want?
Yeah, but you don't respond to those, and they don't know, the people that are being forwarded, the spam that's being forwarded, okay, it's going through another spam filter on your new email service, so they're going to be, some of them are going to get bounced that were showing up on the other one, and then eventually you turn off the old one. It would be like you've got 2 phone numbers. You're getting all of these harassing calls on the old phone number, but you got it forwarded to your new number.
Yeah.
And Once you've got your friends and family trained to dial the new number instead of the old one, then you have the old number turned off.
Well, if I've got lots of email addresses, how do I keep track of all of that? I mean, I have to, no, I mean, do I go to a dozen different locations and?
What I'm going to suggest is this. Okay, Rick, I'm going to suggest that next month I'm doing the topic. We're going to do, how do you handle switching to a new email address?
There you go.
And how do you notify the people? And what's even better with that is it'll also include how do you handle all that stuff in your contacts? Okay.
Is my junk
Hey,
file
Bill,
the same as
it's
the spam
20
file?
till. We probably ought to do a raffle and
Yep.
then give a break.
Okay, so officially
You got the raffle time?
we're going to do raffle. Okay.
Welcome. We want to today do something a little bit different. Can everybody hear me all right? The microphone's on the blitz, so we're going to go without it. So I have a special guest with us today, all the way from San Diego, and it's beautiful there. It's a lot warmer than it is here right now. But anyway.
Oh, it's cold.
Oh, is it cold? It's cold there.
Well,
that
it's
makes me feel a
70?
little bit better.
What, 75?
So I don't know how many of you know Adam. Adam Christianson is a longtime friend of mine. He's a podcaster, among other things. He's been podcasting since, what, 2005?
Yeah, 2004.
2004. I haven't quite listened to his podcast that long, but close to that long. And I've always enjoyed listening to everything he has to say. He knows the Mac inside and out. He's a huge user of Macs for all these years. And as Bill said earlier, he really has a lot of experience with Macs. So I invited him to come today to talk to us about backups. So today he's going to impart some knowledge about backing up your Mac and backing up your stuff, which is really, really important. And I think you're going to enjoy this. And I'm not going to do a lot more introduction. I'm just going to let him go and talk and answer questions. When it comes times for questions, you're going to have to speak up, probably get closer to the front here so he can hear you, or I'll come up here and repeat your questions because he may not hear you in the back of the room. His stuff's going to come out of this, his voice is going to come out of the system here. You should be able to hear it, but if you're having a problem hearing, you might want to slide up a little bit because the PA system is down right at the minute. All right, so without anything further, I'm going to turn you over to MacCast, Adam Christianson.
Hey, how you doing? Here's the proof it's cold. 41. It was the low overnight, so.
Oh. It was 10 here.
I know. We get chilly once it gets 50 or below. We're suffering pretty bad. So how's everybody doing today?
Good.
Looks like a good crowd there. Yep, so as Rick said, I'm here. He asked me to come kind of talk to you guys about backup. Just curious so I can get the temperature of the room. How many people there right now, just by show of hands, do some form of backup of their Mac? Oh, look, good, everybody.
Almost everybody.
Leave your hands up for a second because I'm curious. How many people do more than one form of backup?
Very few, probably about 6, 7.
A bit. Well, we're going to talk about some backup strategies and some additional backup strategies. Last question I have for you: how many people who are doing backup do some form of online backup?
Probably about
1
5
and
or
2.
6. There's about 6
Okay,
you
so
can't see some.
A lot fewer. So we're going to talk also about a little bit about offsite backup and options for. Well, I guess I should also ask this then: if you're not doing online backup, is anybody there doing some form of off-site backup? So where your backup is not stored locally. Okay, so a few others are covered there. So really, where I think I want to start with this is, and I'm going to show you some of my backup strategies and some of the things that I do. I am pretty fanatical about it. because I've suffered data loss. And unfortunately for a lot of us, I think what happens is when we decide to do backup is often when it's too late. So really a lot of this conversation is more to get you thinking about your backups if you're already doing them, or think about backup if you're not doing it, and maybe give you a few strategies and things that will show you that, you know, backup, it sounds like it's going to be a complicated thing. It doesn't have to be. There's a lot of ways to make it really pretty simple. And it's one of those things, you know, like insurance or anything else, it's you hope you never have to use it. You hope it's something you don't need, but when you finally, when a time happens when you need it, you're going to be very glad that you did it. So much of our lives these days are on our devices and on our computers and things like that, and I think it's just really, 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 really important. And through the podcast, I can tell you one of the worst emails that I ever get is the one from someone who says, something went wrong with my Mac, my hard drive completely erased, or I took it to the Mac store, you know, the Apple store, was having problems, they replaced the logic board. And more these days too, I think a problem is that, you know, Macs don't have physical hard drives in them that you can remove anymore. So if you get a new modern Mac, that data storage is on the actual, you know, logic board itself. So if something goes wrong, they need to replace your logic board, there goes your data. If you don't have a backup, that's a problem. So that email that I get often is, something went wrong, my hard drive had to be replaced, or my logic board was replaced and my data's gone. Or they say they need to replace my logic board, I can't get at my data, what can I do? And more these days, the answer is there's really not much. There are recovery programs that you can run, but I can tell you from experience, they take a very, very long time to run and often don't recover everything. And even if they can recover things, very often what you lose is a lot of your data structure. So if you had everything in folders and organized and everything like that, a lot of times all you're getting back is just raw files, and you have to sort through them. And it's just a very painful process. And by having a backup strategy in advance and doing something up front, you can avoid a lot of that pain. And also cost. There are great recovery services like Drive Savers, but I can tell you from experience, generally to recover a hard drive these days, you're looking anywhere from, at a minimum, maybe $800 to a few $1,000s to recover your data. And we'll talk about sort of costs of different ways to do backup as well. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. Are there any questions before I just start diving into things? And again, I'm going to kind of show you some different strategies, starting with probably one of the easiest and then moving into a little more complex concepts. Everybody's good?
Yeah.
Looks like it? Okay, cool. So of those people that are doing backups, how many people are doing a time machine backup? Okay, so probably most of you. So this first part will kind of be for maybe folks who don't have any backup strategy at all. Apple has a built-in technology called Time Machine. It's on every modern Mac operating system, so if you're running a Mac, any OS in probably the OS 10 range. I'm trying to remember when Apple first started doing Time Machine. But it is probably, if you're doing no other backup currently, I would really, really strongly advise that at the very least you utilize Time Machine. And the easiest way to use Time Machine, there's a few ways you can use it, but I think absolutely the easiest way to use it is to buy an external hard drive, a USB external hard drive, plug it into your Mac, and what will happen is if it's a brand new unformatted hard drive, your Mac will generally pop up with a message. It will say, hey, I see you have a new hard drive you've attached. Would you like to use this for Time Machine backup? You click yes, and you're done. You're backing up. It really is as simple as that. Now, that's sort of the basics. From there, we get into some of the questions about Time Machine backup, and one of the most common ones I'll receive is, well, how large of a hard drive should I get for my Time Machine backup? And one of the advantages of Time Machine is that it will back up your entire hard drive. So the first time you connect it, what happens is it backs up your entire hard drive as long as the hard drive that you purchased, the external hard drive, is at least the same size as the internal storage on your Mac. So, for example, if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive on your Mac and you get a 1 terabyte Time Machine drive, it will back up the entire drive, assuming that you've filled up your 1 terabyte. Of course, it's going to back up as much data as you have on there. But my general rule of thumb for most people when selecting a Time Machine hard drive is get one that is at least 2 times the size of your internal storage. So if your internal storage is 1 terabyte, I generally recommend getting a 2 terabyte Time Machine drive. And the reason for that is because the way Time Machine works is it will do that first initial backup of all your data. And then after that backup occurs, actively, just all the time, it will be watching your Mac and what you're doing on it. And as you add files, as you remove files, as you change files, what it'll do is it'll continue to back up those changes. But it will also keep a history of each backup that happens. And the advantage of that is that as things are backing up, it's adding additional information, it's backing up new stuff, but it's also keeping old stuff. And that gives you the ability to actually go back in time. That's why they call it Time Machine. Go back in time a little bit. So if you deleted a file, let's just say a month ago, and then suddenly you realize today, oh, I really need that file back, you can use Time Machine and you can sort of travel back in time to that day a month ago, see a view of your Mac on that day with the file still there. You can select it and recover it. And I'm going to show you how this sort of works here in a second for anybody who hasn't seen it. I'm sure many of you who are using Time Machine maybe are already familiar with it. But where that plays into selecting the storage size of an external hard drive is it's going to keep that history up into a point where that external Time Machine drive gets full, right? Because it's keeping this history, and it's only doing the changed files, so it'll take it a while to fill up. But the more additional space that you have, that means the further back in time, the further back in that history of your backups that you'll be able to go. Once that external Time Machine drive fills up, and this is something that will, and maybe you've seen this pop up, it will pop up a message, and it will say something, I forget the specifics, but it's basically something like, your Time Machine drive has run out of space, I'm going to start deleting files. And that sounds pretty scary. I'm bringing this up because I do get emails about this quite frequently. People will ask, well, why is my Time Machine drive, why is it saying it's full and it's going to start deleting files? Do I need to get a new Time Machine? Do I need to get a bigger hard drive? And the answer is really no, because what that message is telling you is that it has filled up. I'm going to start deleting your very oldest files. So imagine that you deleted a file 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. What it's going to start doing is it's going to start clearing out that really, really old stuff that's really far back in your history to make room for your newer stuff, because the assumption is your newer files are your most important files. If you deleted that a year ago and you never went back and recovered it, they're going to assume, well, you really didn't need that file. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So it is a scary message. You could generally just say okay to it and just be aware that what it's telling you is, hey, I'm going to delete your really, really old backups because we want to make room for your new stuff because we think the new stuff is really important. So that's why I encourage most people to take Time Machine as sort of the first place to start doing backup and building a backup strategy, because it really is as simple as plugging in a hard drive to your Mac and then saying okay to that button. Now, if you didn't do that, you do want to set it up manually, where you can find a Time Machine, and everybody can see my screen here.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me start over here in the Finder. So here's my Finder. I'll show you where my Time Machine drive is. It's this one called, I call it Tesseract. Just happens to be the name. It could be any name. But what this is this is just an external hard drive connected to my Mac. I have a 1 terabyte drive on my MacBook Pro. So as you can see here, hopefully under the capacity, it might be hard to read. This drive is a 2 terabyte just USB drive. Oh, and as far as cost, I don't know if people have gone out and priced external hard drives these days, but remember how I mentioned, you know, if you had to do an emergency recovery through a service, you're probably talking $800 as a starting price point, and you may or may not get all your data back. Most external USB hard drives these days in the 2 terabyte size, I think you're going to be paying probably under $100. And I do know another question I'll often get asked is about brands of hard drives. There's a lot of options out there. My general recommendation is go with a relatively known brand, and when I say that, I'm talking about Seagate or Western Digital. Those are probably two of the bigger ones. Now, they will often have different ranges of drives. In general, just as a general rule of thumb, I tell people you can look at the warranty on the drive to decide, you know, what the quality level of that drive is, because cheaper drives will have sort of shorter warranties, maybe in the 1 year time frame, maybe even shorter. And then as the pricing goes up, you'll see 2 years or 3 years, or I think they even have some 5-year drives. But generally, you're going to be paying more. And really, the differences there are the manufacturer sort of saying, we've tested these drives, we know kind of the failure rates, and the warranty is usually set right about the time frame when they think it could possibly start to fail. Now, that's just a general rule. I do want to point out that hard drives being what they are, being hard drives, they can fail straight from the factory. They can last, you know, 5 years. I have some hard drives that I've had for 5-6 years that are still up and running fine. So that's no guarantee, but it's just a general rule of thumb as to the confidence the manufacturer might have in that drive. In general, with external hard drives and backup drives, I will also tell you, I recommend most people replace their drives every 3 years or so. If you've had it for about 3 years, it's, you know, got a lot of mechanical parts, it's got spinning things. They do wear out over time. So especially for backup, you might want to take that drive, you might want to get a new backup drive, and then just swap it out. But again, recognize too that there's no guarantees against failure, but that's why we do backups. So any questions about that, like buying hard drives or those sorts of things? No, we're good there, all right. So let me show you a little bit about how Time Machine works. So I showed you this drive, TestRack, is my Time Machine drive. When you're setting up Time Machine, if you don't, you know, say okay that first time when you plug it in, if you're kind of doing it after the fact, you can go into your system preferences. Right down here, there should be a Time Machine option. You click on Time Machine, and you would plug in your drive or have your drive already connected, and all you have to do is click this little button that says Select Disk. That will bring up a list of any of the hard disks that are connected to your Mac. You would select the one that you want, and then you would click this option that says Use Disk. And again, then it would start backing up to that drive. I guess another thing that I should mention is I generally recommend that you don't share your Time Machine drive for anything other than Time Machine. You can do that, but I think it's much better if you just dedicate a single hard drive to your Time Machine backup. The other thing that you might want to know about Time Machine that can be a little bit convenient are a couple of other options. One is this checkbox to show Time Machine in the menu bar. That will let you go up to your menu bar and actually access Time Machine. So it's under this little icon. Hopefully you guys can see this. It looks like a little clock with an arrow rolling backwards on it. That will show you a little bit of information like the last time Time Machine ran. So mine ran 7:44 this morning, did a backup. And again, these are happening actively. You don't have any control over the Time Machine schedule. It's just controlled by your operating system. You really won't notice any kind of performance issues on a day-to-day basis with it running, so you don't need to worry about that. You just let it go. You can also choose to manually back up Time Machine from this menu. So you can click the backup now here, and that will initiate an update of your Time Machine data. And then finally, if you click on Options in this System Preference pane, one of the things that you can do is you can exclude certain items from your Time Machine backup. So there may be things that you don't want Time Machine to back up. Other external drives might be one of those options. So in my list here, what you're seeing is I do some other forms of backup. So this disk called backup is what we call clone backup, and we'll talk about clone backup in a little bit. I don't want Time Machine to back that up because it's already a backup. So it would be a backup of a backup, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I just don't need that extra redundancy. So I exclude it so it's not backing up a bunch of my other external drives and things like that. You can also exclude individual files and folders if you want. So if for some reason there's something you don't want it backing up, you would just click this little plus button here, and you can go through your Mac and find a folder or item that you don't want to back up. A common one that people might choose not to back up might be their applications folder. So you could add your applications folder if you know, hey, I can re-download and reinstall those applications. That's not a problem for me. I don't want it to use up the space. I'd rather have that space for other files. So that might be an option. You know, that's kind of an example of something, a situation where you might exclude something. A few other options here. You can back up when you're on battery power. I have mine unchecked because my Time Machine drive sits at home. I have a laptop. So when I'm not here, I'm generally not connected to the drive, so it actually would be able to perform the backup anyway, although there is a little exception to that I'll bring up here in a second. And then if you don't want to get bothered by that message I mentioned earlier about it notifying you when it starts deleting your old backups, you can uncheck this box here, which says notify after old backups are deleted. That's what controls that little pop-up message. So if you do want to be aware of when it's deleting older files, just check that on and you'll continue to get those messages. Any questions there? Okay. The last thing that's just a little bit of minutia related to Time Machine backups. A lot of people do, if you have a laptop, you might wonder if I'm using Time Machine and I'm away or I disconnected from my Time Machine drive, I'm on my laptop, maybe I'm out using it someplace else. Time Machine actually does have a little trick that it uses for when you're disconnected for still performing Time Machine backups. So what it will do is it will actually, if you have available space on your internal hard drive and you're disconnected from Time Machine, when Time Machine is supposed to run to figure out what your new files are, it will actually back up to your local machine in a little hidden area. And then when you get home and reconnect to your Time Machine drive, what it does is it takes those backups that were done while you were away and then pushes them back over to your Time Machine backup. So it kind of has a system for managing that. It's, you know, it's a little backup for your Time Machine backup, I guess, when you're disconnected. And I only bring it up because sometimes people will say, hey, my internal drive's really full, and I don't know where all that storage went. You know, so if you've ever gone to your About This Mac, right, and you look at storage here. So sometimes you'll see, hey, this is full, but I look at my documents folder and it's not all that full. Those Time Machine backups can sometimes be in there. But again, what will happen is your system will actually manage those, and it will recognize that that is still space that you can use for storage. So if it's put things there and you need to save files, it's not going to prevent you from saving files. What it'll do is it will purge out that Time Machine stuff. So it's already flagged as something that is still available space for you to use, but if you're not using it, Time Machine will use it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. All right, any questions about that? So that's kind of your first line, your first strategy. And I just want to do a time check real quick. Rick, I'm on till 8:45, so we have about 25 more minutes.
We started early, so you can go as long as noon.
Okay, I don't want to keep everybody too long, and I want
think
to.
they're still interested. If people start dozing off.
Also leave some time for it.
If people start dozing off, I'll let you know. You're good though.
All right, so we have
Excuse me, Adam?
questions about time machine backup. I did such a great job that all made sense.
Got a question.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, so I have my time machine backup, and somehow one of these people, they seize my computer, and the ransom people, okay?
Right.
I'm still protected against that, aren't I? I can still go back to. In other words, it could have happened that the time machine recorded whatever badness they did to my machine. So I wouldn't want to reinstall that. I would go back a ways and reinstall a previous version, an earlier version.
Okay, so you're asking if somehow you got a virus or something happened to your system?
Yes.
Yeah, generally, Time Machine is not going to. I guess I should have showed you guys a little bit about how Time Machine actually works. Let me move this email out of the way. You don't need to see that. So yeah, in general, Time Machine is more focused on helping you recover individual folders, individual files. I guess you could do the entire. System if you wanted to do that. If you just wanted to go back in time, but recognize if you're going to do that, you're also going to lose potentially any other files, right?
Right.
So it's not just going to be able to clean out, say, the system files or the sort of bad malware stuff that was put into place. Generally, there you're going to want to be a little more surgical about how you're removing things. But yeah, I mean, if you just wanted to go back to a whole point in time and you didn't care about emails that might come in or other data that's in other parts of your system, you could go back and do a full restore of, say, your home directory or your system, something like that. But generally, that's not what Time Machine would be used for. You probably want more of a full clone backup strategy where you're doing multiple clones, and I'm not even sure how you would necessarily set that up. Generally, when I have a client or I'm working with someone who has more like a malware attack, it's more about finding out what malware got on the system and then using malware removal tools to go in and specifically expunge or get rid of those specific files. A Time Machine could help you there if, say, you knew, it put stuff into my system folder or into my library folder in a certain location, right? So you could go to your library folder and go back in time and just restore that library folder to, the day before you got the infection or the hour before you got the infection. So I guess that would work. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Something that's somewhat related to that that I do want to bring up that people do ask about as well, and you might have seen this when I brought up the Time Machine preferences here. In selecting the disk, do you see this little option that says, it's grayed out in my thing because I set this up already, but you see this option that says encrypt backup disks? So some people will often ask, what if I'm using FileVault? And we're not going to get too much into FileVault here, but FileVault is a way to, it's a security thing that's built into Mac OS where when you turn it on, it will encrypt the data on your internal hard drive. So that if your hard drive or your laptop was stolen and someone was trying to get at your data, as long as they don't have the login for your Mac or your Mac is not auto-logging in, all of the data on your hard drive is encrypted and protected. When you do backup, both cloned backups or Time Machine backups, those sorts of things, generally the external hard drive that you connect is not encrypted. So it would back up all your data from your Mac to be not encrypted unless you check that option on for encrypt backup disks. And where this comes up often when I get questions is someone says, hey, what if someone breaks into my house and they steal my backup hard drive? Do they have access to my data? Generally, they would if that drive is unencrypted. If you choose that option to encrypt that drive, though, then that data would be protected. So that's another scenario where maybe you want to protect your data. You might want to check that option on. Same thing goes for your laptop. If you're not using the file vault protection, if your laptop were stolen and someone were to probe or get access to that hard drive, and that data was not encrypted, of course that data would be accessible as well. So does that make sense?
I have another question.
I have a question
Okay,
too.
cool. Yeah.
Okay, which one of us is going first?
Go ahead.
Okay. In years past, Time Machine had in that icon in the menu bar, it would indicate whether it was backing up or not. That no longer happens unless you have that column in the left where you can see that something's happening. Usually that's not open, and I'd like to be able to just glance at the top. Is that available anyway?
You should be able to, when Time Machine Backup is running, can you see this little icon with the little
Right,
arrow?
and it doesn't spin or anything like it used to.
It should. I mean, it should. Let's just try it. Like if I click Backup now, oh, it looks like maybe they didn't remove the animation, but it did add this little extra, oh, maybe because it's preparing right now. So I don't know if you saw it added this little extra triangle or arrow. I think that's because it's now preparing backup, and you see how if I click on it, it says preparing backup?
Yeah.
So we can maybe let it run and give it a second, but eventually it should start to say that it is doing the backup. I thought that animation still went, but maybe they did change it from an animation to just a change in icon with adding this little extra. That's really subtle, but
small.
I mean, there still should be an indicator that it is actually running, and definitely when you click on it, I know that this message at the top, it's generally in gray, like grayed out. It would say, hey, the backup is running. Now, I mean, recognize that once you've enabled this, the first time it'll take a while for the Time Machine to run because it's backing up your entire disk. Once it's finished, each subsequent update, because it runs at a regular interval, will not take quite as long. So if you don't have a lot of files changing on your system, if you're just doing email and web surfing and you're not creating a lot of big files or things like that, that backup process should run pretty quickly. So it may just be that you're not catching it when it's happening, but I mean there still should be indications that Time Machine is running. So
it's been a long time since I've ever seen that thing spin. And if you go over to your left-hand column and look at your list under, I can't read it from here, but the name of your backup, it's not indicating that anything's happening right now, other than you have a means of ejecting it.
So on the left, you mean in my Finder?
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice this before the meeting. Generally, this icon would have a Time Machine icon on it, so I'm assuming there's something else going on my system. I'm not sure why. If I just need to do a reboot or something has happened, because normally this icon would be, it would look like a green Time Machine, and you see how it looks like just a general orange external hard drive. So something else is happening on my system. I am pretty sure when mine is running, I do see a little
right. That's where you see
spinning wheel icon.
That's the only place I see it. The other thing is, I'm using a MacBook Pro, and when I shut it down, turn it completely off, like in the evening, is the length of time it takes to shut down dependent on the backup it might be doing at the time?
No.
So it just immediately stops backing up when you turn your machine off?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, but it will pick back up the next time you turn it on.
Roger, okay.
And so I can confirm, and I learned something today. It looks like they changed this icon, so you do not get an animation, apparently. What you get is just this little extra, looks like arrow. I guess it's adding an extra arrowhead. If I do click on it, though, it is showing that it's currently actively backing up.
Right.
You can see that there. It's changing from 547 megabytes to...
Right.
Yeah, it's got a number. Did you want to go next, Mark, and then we'll go down here to the
Yeah. What's your experience or your opinion of using a partitioned hard drive to do time machine backup?
Again, I generally recommend that you dedicate a single hard drive to time machine backups rather than trying to let that time machine drive do a dual purpose. The main reason for not doing a partitioned is that generally people are doing it because they want to put time machine on one side of that partition and then some other data on the other partition. The issue is when it comes to hard drive failure, right? What happens when that drive fails? The whole drive fails. It doesn't matter that it's partitioned. You're going to lose both sides of it. So you're going to have to replace the drive anyway. You're going to lose your data. And that's actually a great thing to lead into our next conversation, because if time machine backup is the only backup that you're doing, and for some reason you have a catastrophic failure of your time machine hard drive, then until you replace it, obviously you are without backup. Worst case scenario is something happens where your time machine fails and then your internal hard drive fails. Now you have no backup. So generally with backup strategies, I recommend that you at least have 2 forms of backup, maybe more. Maybe you want more, especially for your critical data. And so we'll talk about some of those strategies too. Real quickly, before we leave Time Machine, I do want to show you sort of how Time Machine works. So I'm going to go just to my Documents folder here. All right, so when you need to recover or restore a file or a folder from Time Machine, and again, probably a lot of you, because it seems like you use Time Machine, have probably seen this, but just in case nobody has, you go in the Finder, you can either launch the Time Machine application from your Applications folder, or again, if you've enabled it in the menu bar like I showed you earlier, the easy way to do it is click on the Time Machine icon, and you say Enter Time Machine. And then it's going to do this little animation. Hopefully, can you guys still see that?
Yes.
Okay, because sometimes it doesn't display it. So you see this sort of stacked windows that are fading back. And you have a couple little controls here. You can see a little timeline here with different dates. So as I roll over this, these are all those incremental backups that I was talking about. So you can see these are from January. And I'll just show you something here. For the current month, so the way it does the history is the current month, it's going to back up, or the current week, I think it is, it's going to back up every hour. Right? And then after the current week, what will happen is it'll start to back up, I think, every week. So at some point, or every day, sorry. So it's going to back up once a day. It's going to keep the backups for once a day. And then as you roll further back, see here in December, it's keeping a backup for each week. So recent files are backed up more frequently, and as you go further back in time, it's going to back up a little, it's going to keep the backups a little less frequently. But let's just say, I suddenly realized, oh man, there's a file that I knew I had here in my Documents folder, and it's not there anymore. I know that last time I saw it was back in November, so I can click on November here, and it's going to animate back in time. And now what I'm looking at is a view of my Documents folder from back in November. And what I can do is I can select that file. So let's say it was this file. I can select that, and then down here at the bottom, I can click Restore. And then what it's going to do is it's going to bring me forward to today, and then it will restore that file. Now, it is going to pop up and ask me hey, you're restoring the file. In this case, the file already exists. So if the file does already exist, it will ask me, do I want to keep the original? So do I want to get the one that I am, I just asked it to restore and get rid of the one that is existing there, or do I want to keep both? Or sorry, keep the original, so keep the one that's there, not bring back the one from back in time. I apologize, I got that backwards. Do I want to keep both files, or do I just want to replace the file that's there? And this will only pop up if you have, if you're restoring, say, an older version of the file, something like that. If this file had been deleted, it would just go ahead and bring it forward and restore it for me. So I'm, in this case, going to tell it to keep both, just so you can see how that works. And so you can see what happened here was it labeled one original, and then this is going to be my restored one. So this was the one that was originally there. This is the one that I just restored. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how Time Machine works. And you can do that. And you can do that for folders. You can do that for volumes. You can do that for anything. The one other area that I will point out real quickly where Time Machine works is in your email. So if you've deleted an email or lost an email from back in time, you can also inside, and this is only Apple's mail program, so only if you use Apple's mail program, but if you do use Apple Mail, mail.app, and you activate Time Machine inside that, what you'll see here, and unfortunately I noticed earlier this had a little bit of a user interface bug in it. You can see it behaves a little bit weird. It gets really tiny, and I don't know why. And this is the latest version of Mojave. You can grab the corner and resize it here, but it's behaving a little bit weirdly. And I will tell you that email, for some reason, it will take a while for it to populate in your email. But again, it's the same sort of interface. I can go back in time here, so I could go back to October, and I could get a view of my inbox. And now I'm looking at all of my mail messages from October. I know this little window gets squished and it's kind of hard to see, but you can still interact with it. And so, like, here was an email that I know I deleted, way back from October 4th. If I wanted to recover this, I could select it. I could hit that recover button, that restore button, and you can see the visual stuff that's behaving weirdly. But I can hit restore here, and it is going to restore that email back into my inbox. So that's how Time Machine works. All right. So another kind of backup that you might choose to do or might want to do is something called a clone backup. And there's two kind of big programs on the Mac that do this. One is called Carbon Copy Cloner. The other one is called Super Duper. How many people there use either Carbon Copy Cloner or Super Duper? Okay, so quite a few of you. So this is a little bit different strategy than Time Machine. The idea behind a cloned backup is that it will take the contents of your internal hard drive and create an exact one-to-one copy of everything that is on that drive. So it's going to do the entire drive, it will back up the entire drive, and generally what you'll do is you'll put that on some sort of schedule. The way I have mine set up is I have it set up to happen every day, so each evening I have it run. What it does is it takes all of the contents of my internal hard drive and backs it up to an external drive. In my case, that's this drive, which I simply call backup. So this, I think backup. So let me launch Carbon Copy Cloner, and I can sort of show you how this application works. Okay. So this is Carbon Copy Cloner. It is a similar situation. You basically are going to select, your source hard drive, which is going to be your Macintosh hard drive. Then you're going to select a destination drive. In this case, it's this one called Beauregard, which is the one that I use for this. And then you will pick a schedule. And I like to have it run daily. So each day this is going to run. I'm going to have it wake up the system. I generally just accept the defaults for this. And if I'm disconnected, this last one, what it's asking me is if I'm disconnected, what do I want to do? I want to run the backup next time the backup drive is reconnected. A couple other features that Carbon Copy Cloner has is this thing called a safety net. This will, again, store a little bit of history of any modified or deleted files, again, if you have the available space on your hard drive. So it has a little bit of that time machine sort of built into it, but really, I view clone backup as sort of a separate backup strategy. Where I use time machine is for this sort of situations where, oops, I accidentally deleted a file, I need to go back in time. Where I rely on my clone backup is, oh, my whole entire hard drive failed, I need to get back up and running fairly quickly. I can take that cloned hard drive and boot from it, because a big advantage of clone backups, and you'll see this indicated here, that Carbon Copy Cloner will create a bootable clone of your internal hard drive. That means that if your internal hard drive were to fail, you can start up your Mac, you can hold down the Option key, and you can select your cloned backup as your boot drive, and it will basically put you back to the version of your Mac that is exactly the same as the last time that clone backup ran. So in my case, it's going to be each evening. I want to change the time here, though. I like to have it run at about, in the evening when I'm not using my Mac, let's just say 11 p.m. So I'm just changing the time here when that daily backup will run. And as you can see, you can set this up for multiple, however you want. Maybe you want to have it run daily, and maybe you want to do a second one. Maybe you want to get a second clone hard drive that you run weekly to kind of give you a daily backup, and then you could have a separate weekly backup of your system if you want to do sort of incremental backups. And that is a good thing to point out when it comes to clone backup, because one of the differences of clone backup versus time machine backup is each time your clone backup runs, it's a snapshot of your internal hard drive at that time. So in this case for me, every day when this runs, it will make my cloned backup, my Carbon Copy Cloner backup, look exactly like my internal hard drive on my Mac at that point in time. There is kind of no history with cloned backup. It's more, something has happened, I want my machine back the way it was yesterday or the last time that backup ran. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and install this. It wants to install a helper tool. So what it's asking here is, and you probably have all noticed this recently too, Apple has put more and more emphasis on security and privacy, specifically when it comes to what third-party applications might do on your computer. And because Carbon Copy Cloner, in order to do its job, needs full access to your files in your operating system, it has to ask for additional permissions from you to be able to perform its duties. So that's what it's doing here. It's saying, hey, we want to be able to access certain things on your system. The operating system by default won't allow this. Will you give us permissions? So it's asking me to enter my admin login on my Mac, basically. So, and if I get the right password. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, you can allow that. And now it's telling me, see, you need to grant full access to our application. So I'm going to open my security and privacy system preference pane, and I'm going to have to click this little lock.
Unlock it.
And again, enter my admin password.
Unlock it and give it permission.
And then I'm supposed to give full access to...
Drag the
fisher. Do you see it? I don't even see it in here. Carbon. Oh, here. I need to click the little plus maybe. I have to click the plus and say carbon copy cloner. And it mentioned here too that I have to click this later option. So he asked. And now it's asking if I want to copy my recovery partition from my Mac over to the clone, and I want to do that as well. All right. So that's getting all set up. And I'll just show you in my Finder sort of how this works. So what will happen now is every night at 11 p.m., Carbon Copy Cloner is going to launch. It's going to take a snapshot of my current internal hard drive. It's going to copy that over to the external drive that is called Beauregard on my system, which it's unmounted right now because it's building out the recovery partition. But then it's going to create a full clone of my internal hard drive to my external hard drive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, cool. Any questions about clone backup or any of that sort of thing?
One in the back, one in the front.
Yep.
My question, sir, is can you make any comment about airport time capsule?
I didn't quite hear that.
He asked about time capsule, if you had any comments about time capsule.
Oh, time capsule. Yeah. So doing, the actual, you have questions about the actual product itself, the time capsule product, or
yes, that's what he's asking.
The idea of doing a network-based time machine?
Yeah, he has one. He just wondered about the future and if you have any comments about what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, so Apple has officially discontinued and stopped selling the time capsule product.
Oops.
For those people, is anybody here not familiar with time capsule or doesn't know what that is? Okay, everybody knows what time capsule is. Good. So it was Apple's network product for doing network-based time machine backups. And I guess I should have mentioned that earlier when we were talking about time machine, because that is something that you can do. The product itself has been discontinued. The time capsules themselves, the hardware, are getting a little bit older. So my advice would be to you, eventually you're probably going to have to replace that. If it's continuing to work and it's working fine for you right now, I think it's okay. But just like I said earlier, generally for backup hard drives, I tend to want to replace them after about 3 years. So I don't know how long you've had your time capsule for.
Pushing that long.
You haven't had it that long yet?
Yeah, about 3 years.
About 3 years, yeah. So it's probably getting time to maybe replace it with some other solution. I can tell you that Time Machine, from a network backup perspective, is supported on a number of network-attached storage devices from different manufacturers. I know, like the Western Digital MyCloud line supports it. There's a company called Apollo that makes something. There's a company called Synology that makes a number of solutions that will let you do network Time Machine backups. As a matter of fact, I have a Synology, and I do use their Time Machine option to back up my kids' computers because they don't physically connect them. They're just connected to the Wi-Fi. So what Time Capsule allows you to do, or any of these solutions that I just mentioned from a Time Machine perspective, is you can actually go into the Time Machine system preferences, and rather than, when you hit select disk, rather than select a physical hard drive that's connected physically to your Mac, you would have options to pick up and select network attached drives to do your time machine.
I also have to have the airport time capsule for Wi-Fi connection.
Right. So you can continue to use that. So if you do replace your time capsule portion or your time machine backup portion with some other thing, you can continue to use just the network side of that that device, and then also to just disable the time machine thing. I do know another thing that you could do though, and this is what I generally advise people, is just be aware that, you know, the built-in hard drive that's in there, if it's still working for you, I would say continue to use it. If it does eventually fail for some reason, I know the time capsules also have a USB port, and I think you can connect an external USB drive and use that as a network.
Okay.
So I don't see any problem in continuing to use the product as long as it continues to function for you. I mean, eventually Apple, you know, they're not doing software updates for it. It is going to get long in the tooth, and at some point you're probably going to want to replace it with a more modern solution. But you know, I don't think there's any reason to, you know, get rid of it anytime soon as long as it's still working. But that's, you know, that's again, that's my philosophy.
Yeah, it's working. Thank you.
Another question?
Yeah, my question has to do if you're running either carbon copy cloner or similar cloning software, and it's in the process of doing the clone backup, and Time Machine says it's time to do a backup as well. Do they automatically deconflict, or do you have to worry about one screwing up the other?
No, they should run fine together. I run them fine. I've been running them together for years. They shouldn't run into each other. Shouldn't be a problem at all.
Is there another question before we go on? I think we have one more topic. Thank you. Yeah, the offsite. Okay, Adam, we're good.
Oh, we're ready to move on? No more questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Real quick, I guess the last thing, because I don't want to get too long on time, right? You guys are wrapping up about now?
Yeah.
So the one other sort of backup strategy that I have and that I use is, you know, I only have my personal term for it. I call it, I guess we should talk real quickly. Shoot, there's too many things to talk about. Let's talk about online backup or offsite backup. So a really important thing, we've kind of covered, you know, doing local hard drives and things like that, but what happens if there is some sort of, unfortunately, like disaster? The most common one, and it's something we worry about here a lot in California, is fire, right? What happens if your house catches fire, the hard drive, you know, you lose your Mac, you lose your hard drive, or also theft is another one. You have a break-in, someone steals your Mac, they steal your backup drives. Well, now, again, you don't have your data. So a good way to generally handle that from a backup perspective is to have some sort of offsite strategy. And there are two ways that you can do that. I know people, and it sounds like there's a couple people there, that will do a clone backup, like we were describing, but then have two hard drives. So what happens is you have one drive. Every night your backup runs, it clones to that drive, and then maybe once a week you physically take that hard drive and you take it to another location. And you swap it out with another drive, you bring that in, and now you have that one at home, you have the other one offsite somewhere. It could be at a relative's house, it could be stored in a safe deposit box, it could be, doesn't matter where it is, it could be at your office if you work. It's just that it's in a separate physical location. So that's one way to handle offsite backup. The other way that I think is a lot easier these days is to use some sort of service. There's a number of different services for doing online or offsite backup, you know, through the internet. The one that I use currently is Backblaze. I used to use a company called CrashPlan, although recently they stopped doing home backup. I know there's a few other popular ones out there. I'm trying to remember.
Carbonite.
Carbonite, yes, that's another one of the very, very popular ones. And again, it's any one of these services. The main thing is going to be cost. I chose CrashPlan or Backblaze because it's $5 a month per computer. And that backup also includes any external hard drives. And the data is unlimited. So you can have as much data stored up there as you want. And the way these generally work is you sign up for the service. You do have to pay monthly or yearly. And then you just install an application. You download and install an application. And in the case of Backblaze, it's a system preference. And so just like Time Machine, you go in here, you select it, it will walk you through the process of setting up the options, but basically in the settings what you would do is you pick the drives and devices that you want to back up. So in my case, I back up my internal hard drive and some of my external drives that I have data on. For example, my media drive is where I have all of my iTunes files, so all of my music and movies and those sorts of things. And then you can fine-tune some things in terms of performance because it does use your network to do your backup, so it's going to use your internet connection. You can set up a schedule. I turned mine off right now because I didn't want this running during the presentation because we're using Skype and I didn't want it using my network activity. Normally this is set to continuously, so just like Time Machine, the way Backblaze works and the way a lot of these online backup services work is it will initially do an entire backup of all your data, and then after all of that is up and stored in the cloud, then what it'll do is it'll just do, as your files change, it will back up those files. And it does keep a history, at least Backblaze does, and I think most of these services do. So they also have the ability to allow me to go back in time and maybe restore some files that I might have deleted in the past. Just like Time Machine, they also do have the ability to exclude files. And with online backup, I do really recommend that you be selective about what files you're backing up because it is a lot of data going over the internet, going over your internet connection. So the initial online backup can take a long time. So you can see here, one of the things that I tell Backblaze not to back up is my applications folder. And the reason is that I have other backups of that locally between my clone backup and my Time Machine backups. But also, I know that I can reinstall my applications from scratch if I need to. Like, those are downloadable, or I can get them through the App Store, or wherever I need to get them to restore them. So there are a lot of things that I do exclude. I also exclude some of the backup files that are backups of my backups, those sorts of things. And that's pretty much it. So what you do is you install the software, you configure it, and then you just let it run. I will tell you, the very first backup you do when you do an online backup service takes a long time. I believe, again, my internal hard drive is about 1 terabyte. I'm also backing up some external drives. So currently, I'm backing up to Backblaze about 3, almost 4 terabytes of data. That first backup took months.
Wow. Mine took like that. Mine was the same way. It took forever.
But here's the thing, you don't really need to worry about that. A lot of people worry about this. They say, well, it takes months, what's the point? The point is, the software will start to back up your newest files first, so it starts backing up, all the things that you're currently working on, and then it sort of works backwards in time. So right away, within the first couple days or weeks, probably your most critical files are going to get backed up. And then it's going to start working on the older stuff. You don't worry about it. You just let it run. It does its thing in the background. It won't affect performance on your Mac. It can affect your network performance initially. So if you're doing a Skype call or you're noticing you're trying to watch a video and maybe that's being impacted, you might want to go in, and it does install a little menu bar item up here. You can pause it, you can stop it for a bit of time and then re-enable it. You can also go into the settings and you can sort of fine-tune under this performance stuff what happens with the network. You can control, how much data does it use, those sorts of things. But just let it run, don't worry about it. It will eventually do its thing. And then once, like I have it now, where it's got all of my data in the cloud, it's just going to back up new files and changed files, and that happens pretty quickly. So I'm a big fan of offsite backup. another nice thing that a service that Backblaze offers is if you do have a catastrophic failure, like a fire, you lose all your data, they will allow you to purchase a hard drive, send it to them, and they will load all your data on it and then send it back to you, rather than having to re-download 4 times over the internet.
I have done that. I have done that, and it was amazing because it got the backup.
Yep.
One drive, and it was all there.
Yep. And what's nice about this is it's going to have all your file structure. It's going to have all that data stuff. If you do need to just restore single files or individual files, you can log into their site and do that. You can selectively add files. Another nice thing with Backblaze too is they do also have an iOS app, and I can use that iOS app to access files that might be in the backup should I need to. I've never really used that feature, but it is an option. So
yeah, I've used that one too. I've logged in on my iPad and grabbed a file that I needed off of my Backblaze backup from back in the past. It works really good.
So that's really the last form of backup I think we need to talk about. That kind of covers the majority of ways you might want to back up. I'll just summarize and end by saying, I do really recommend you have at least one form of backup, and if you're going to pick anything, I would say start with Time Machine. I think it's absolutely the easiest thing you can do. Beyond that, I would really recommend having some sort of offsite strategy. So between those two things, that's going to protect you from most catastrophic failures, Time Machine and some sort of offsite. If you can do a clone backup, that's nice and convenient, because you can move from it. So that's it.
Can you put your face back up on the screen, Adam, so everybody can see who you are?
Yeah.
So that was great. How about giving a round of applause? Adam, real quick, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you? Because I would pitch for you, but I think it's better if you tell them.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Adam Christianson. The place you can most easily find me is maccast.com. That's maccast.com. That's the website for my podcast. You can also just find my podcast in iTunes if you search for Maccast. So I do a weekly podcast where we just cover Apple and Mac news a little bit, and then also take questions and try and help people with their Mac products, their Apple products and technology. Yeah. So if you need help with that, and I'll just give you my email. I know we've covered a lot here. I do answer all of my emails, so if you have additional questions about backup or just anything Apple or Mac related, you can email me. It's maccast, MACCAST, @gmail.com.
Excellent.
Thanks.
We really appreciate it.